It is explained that among the continent's jewels, there are some special ones. Very rarely, gems are found at house ancient, long-forgotten magics. Because of their power, these rare jewels are known as magic stones. The scene changes to a ballroom where a nobleman is throwing a grand party. But underground, enslaved people are forced to polish stones in terrible working conditions. The sound of a clock echoes through the place, indicating that the day's shift is over. A boy with black and white hair says that's enough for today, and puts his stone away. But a guard catches him and asks what the heck that is, as it's not well polished. The man complains that with junk like that, they won't make any money. With a mocking smile, the supervisor shows a perfectly polished and shiny gem. He says that if they're going to polish stones, they need to make them beautiful like that one. The boy then tries to grab the jewel from the guard's hand, who is very surprised. He refuses to hand over the stone he was holding before being interrupted. The young man says he was still in the middle of polishing that one before getting shoved. On the ground, the boy glares at the supervisor, who asks if it's him again. With a trickle running from the corner of his mouth, he continues looking at the man. His eyes glow, and the irritated guard says that look really gets on his nerves. The supervisor asks if he thinks he's all that just because he's good at polishing stones. Angrily, the man shows the boy who was on the ground with his foot. The young man curls up from the impact, as the supervisor says he needs to be taught a lesson. He grabs the boy's hair and says he can polish everyone's stones. With a strange smile, the young man tells the man to let that decide how many there will be. Then the two guards start roughing up the boy without any mercy. One of the hits lands right on the boy's face, but he doesn't seem to react. After they're done, they leave him on the floor and tell the others to go to their beds. With great difficulty, the young man drags himself over to the supervisors, who stare at him. He touches one of their shoulders and says that was only 3 hits so far. The man is confused, and the young man asks him to hit him 3 more times before he goes, with his eyes glowing pink. He reminds the guard of the deal they made earlier. Startled, the supervisor shows him and yells at the boy not to touch him. But the young man insists and clings to the man, asking for more. He keeps begging for more, and the guard asks if he's gone crazy. Out of patience, the two men start roughing him up again, even harder. Even while being pushed around, the young man's gaze remains firm as he yells for them to back off. An old man who is also enslaved just watches the scene as he gets shoved by the guard. Next, the boy is thrown forcefully into a dark, cold cell. He sits on the floor alone and hurt. Next to another unconscious prisoner, a light enters through the dungeon window, illuminating the gloomy environment a little. Upon waking, the young man realizes it's already morning and that he got a little too carried away. He remembers with a smile the many colors of stones he has seen, like red and yellow. It was the first time he had seen a light blue jewel, and he felt it was denser than the others. Holding the gem in his hand, he admires it, thinking how beautiful it was. He wishes he could see more types of stones, if they would just let him polish them normally. Suddenly, a furious gaze appears in the darkness, staring intently at him. The guard appears at the cell and yells for everyone to get out because it's time to work. The old man from before approaches and asks the boy if he can stand up. The young man replies that he can, and the old man carefully helps him up. The other prisoners find the old man's attitude strange, as he had never spoken to the boy. Going up the stairs, he thinks that since he arrived, no one had ever spoken to him. Back at the polishing tables, the old man sits next to him in silence. The boy asks if he needs something, and the old man replies, just a little. The supervisor arrives and warns him to polish the stones properly today, and the boy agrees. The man still threatens him, saying he'll get a beating if he catches him dozing off again. The young man ignores the threat and focuses on the stone he holds in his hands. He analyzes a purple stone, wondering if the color is mixed with a dark red. With an eager smile, he can hardly wait to see how the jewel will look after being polished. The old man beside him then asks why he did that with the guards. The boy replies that he's trying to concentrate, but the old man insists on the question, not understanding at all. The young man turns and asks what the old man means by that. He says it was nothing and that he just wanted to polish stones because that's what he likes. The boy reveals he never saw anything beautiful in the alleys where he grew up as an orphan in his past. He only fought to survive and felt like an empty shell. He admits that being treated as an enslaved person in that place is a living nightmare. But as long as he's there, he can polish these mysterious and fascinating stones. The old man stares at him with a serious and unquestioning expression after hearing his story. He asks if the boy got beat up and sacrificed his sleep just for those stones. Annoyed, the young man tells the old man to leave him alone, as what he likes is none of his business. He then says he just really likes the beauty of those small, mysterious jewels. The old man picks up a rough stone and asks if he finds this little pebble beautiful. The boy's eye gleams. And he says the more you polish it, the more the inner pattern shines. The old man is surprised and admits that watching the stones glow makes him feel calmer, shocked. He asks how the boy can see that, and the young man doesn't understand his surprise. The old man becomes thoughtful, stroking his beard, and says he understands the situation now. With a different look, he thinks that this boy might have what it takes. The old man explains that what the boy sees is actually a very ancient magic. The special jewels that hold this power are known as magic stones. In short, incredible magic is inside them and can be used with a Grimoire. But the ones they polish, there are just a small fraction of the cheapest ones that exist. The boy is surprised and asks if there are other beautiful stones in other places. The young man's hair even stands on end, as the older man confirms that there are. Out there in the world, there are magic stones with the power of wind, fire, and water. There are countless magic stones with all kinds of magic, far more than the ones they polish. The boy understands that the world is full of all kinds of magic stones. He wonders if there are many more than what they have in that place. The young man calls out to the old man and asks him to tell him more about the magic stones. He asks where he can find them, and the old man says he first needs to get out of there. The mere thought of leaving that place leaves the boy in complete shock. Suddenly, something happens, and the old man is thrown to the ground, dropping a stone. The boy runs to help the old man as a nobleman asks, who is talking about leaving. Suddenly, a man in noble's clothing appears, holding a beautiful grimoire. The book in his hand has a luxurious appearance and seems to be very powerful. The boy is frozen, looking at the man who appeared out of nowhere. Surrounded by guards, the nobleman asks where the prisoner thinks he's going. His green eyes shine with anger as he glares at the two enslaved people. The young man remains paralyzed, not quite understanding what is happening there. The man scoffs, saying he didn't imagine. He still had the energy to think about that. With hatred in his eyes, the old man says that man's name, calling him Malik. He says that man has a lot of nerve to appear in front of him. The nobleman just stares at him with a very mocking smile on his face. The boy asks if they know each other, and the older man confirms they do. With a serious look, the old man reveals that Malik has strayed from the path of mages. He calls him a traitor, and the nobleman pretends to be offended by the accusation. The villain says they worked together as mages for over 30 years. The old man confirms it's true as he clenches his fist tightly. A flashback shows the two when they were younger, and how the old man always trusted the villain. The memory continues, showing the two having fun together at a party. But everything changed 2 weeks ago when a girl was taken hostage. The old man accuses Malik of using the girl to steal his book and sell stones. As the head of the Grimoire mages, he says he cannot forgive that betrayal. The nobleman laughs and calls his former friend a hypocrite to his face. He reveals that the old man's granddaughter was taken hostage. Because he was too soft, we find out that the old man is a genius who has mastered more than 10 types of ancient magic. Because of his power, he is known as the orchestrator of miracles. His grimoire glows intensely, showing just how powerful he truly is. The villain mocks him, saying that without that book, he's nothing but a weak and useless old man. With hatred in his eyes, the old man tells the man to get his filthy hands off his book. Malik repeats the mage's words with a sneering and sarcastic smile. He says he thought he could use the grimoire's power, but was unsuccessful. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't summon the ancient magic on the same level. Annoyed, the villain throws the book on the ground, calling it useless junk, and the jewels glow. The boy wonders what that is, as the book and the beautiful stones are glowing. The jewels scattered on the floor emit a strong, colorful light that illuminates the place. The boy's eyes shine, and his heart races uncontrollably at the sight. He feels a strong connection to these magical objects, as if they were a part of him. A cosmic vision shows that the young man feels as if the stones are calling to him. He realizes that the mage's strength doesn't come from those magical tools on the floor. The boy wonders where the old man's power comes from, since it's not from the book. Malik then understands that his former friend's true power comes from his eyes. The villain shouts the mage's name, which is Klaus, and tells him to spill his secret already. He grabs him and asks how he can perceive the power of the magic stones. Klaus tries to resist, and pushes the villain away with the boy's help. But one of the guards attacks him from behind, hitting him with a strong blow. The young man shouts for the old man, while one of the henchmen holds him back, defeated and on his knees. Klaus glares at his former companion with contempt. He says that even if he told him the secret, the villain wouldn't be able to see it. The mage insults him, saying his eyes are clouded and full of greed. Malik becomes furious with the provocation and calls him every name in the book. He grabs the old man's hair and calls him an arrogant, hypocritical wretch. The villain says that right now, he's nothing more than fragile and helpless trash. He threatens him, saying he will use him as a test subject to steal his power. The nobleman wants to take Klaus's eyes and power for himself, no matter what. He swears he will do whatever it takes to get what he wants as the guards grab the book. Malik turns his back on his former friend and begins to walk away. He picks up a lit candle that was in a holder on the dungeon wall with a quick motion. The villain throws the candle toward the magical objects. The boy watches the scene, shocked by the nobleman's cruel and unexpected action. The candle flies through the air and lands exactly on top of the grimoire on the floor. Klaus screams in despair and asks what Malik thinks he's doing with his book. The villain says if the power doesn't come from the book, then it's no longer useful. With a wicked smile, he states he'll make sure Klaus never thinks of escaping again. The guards hold the mage tightly as he screams for the villain to stop. The flames consume the grimoire and the magic stones that were with it. The fire spreads and one of the jewels flies toward the boy who is paralyzed. The glowing stone stops right in front of his face and his eyes widen. The boy runs toward the flames and Klaus watches him, shocked by his action. Without a second thought, the young man throws himself into the middle of the fire, surprising everyone. Even with his hands burning, he endures the pain to grab the magical items. With his face sweating, he thinks that he has to save the stones no matter what. He then starts picking up all the magic stones that were scattered on the floor. Klaus desperately shouts for the boy to get the book, which is also burning. The boy remains kneeling in the middle of the flames, completely focused on his mission. One of the guards tries to put out the fire with his foot and tells the boy to stop it. Malik grabs him furiously and asks what that brat thinks he's doing. The villain gets a look of hatred as smoke rises from the extinguished fire. But the young man holds the man's leg and, with a threatening look, tells him not to interfere. With a shove, the boy manages to get free from the guard and goes back to the fire. He reaches his hand toward the grimoire to try to save it from the flames. With a face full of determination, he tries his best to reach the book. Finally, the boy manages to grab the flaming grimoire with his bare hands. With a smile on his face, he stretches out his arm to grab the valuable object. The moment he touches the book, a very strong golden light begins to shine. The young man is completely engulfed in a pillar of light and fire that rises to the heavens. Klaus watches the scene in shock and wonders if the boy could be who he imagines. Inside the light, the boy is confused, not understanding what is happening to him. He feels his body burning from the inside as if he were in a whirlwind of fire. His eyes glow red, and he sees everything around him shining intensely. A sphere of brilliant energy appears, and he feels like he can do anything now. Malik can't believe what he's seeing and says that is completely impossible. Klaus's granddaughter watches from a distance and wonders how an enslaved boy became a grimoirism. The villain becomes desperate with the situation and starts yelling at his henchman. He orders one of the guards to bring him the book the boy is holding. Malik himself then runs to grab the grimoire from the young man's hands right now. The boy holds the glowing book, which seems to have connected with him somehow, determined. He opens his grimoire and says he won't let the book fall into Klaus's hands. The villain uses a water spell to attack the boy who has awakened his powers. But the young man uses the grimoire and casts a water spell called Aqua Deviled. The villain also uses his book to control the water and create a powerful attack. The nobleman's water attack advances to put out the fire protecting the boy. But the young man's spell creates a water barrier that protects him from the attack. Malik is shocked once again, as he didn't expect the boy to know how to defend himself. Next, an explosion of light happens where the boy is blinding everyone. He looks at the flames around him and notices something very surprising. The boy discovers he can move the fire and creates a wall of flames with his hands. The villain is perplexed and wonders what's so special about that boy. The villain is shocked because the newly awakened young man can already manipulate magic. With the grimoire in hand, the boy kneels, surrounded by the flames he now controls. Klaus realizes the boy's special eye can see the letters of ancient magic. He understands that the boy has a very high compatibility with that type of power. With the right stone and book, it's possible to unleash an unimaginable magical force. The old man then thinks that this boy might be an unbelievable prodigy. But he worries because despite his talent, the young man is still an inexperienced rookie. The mage fears that Malik is too strong for him, and that at this rate, things will get worse. The villain launches a water attack that collides with the flames controlled by the boy. Desperate, Klaus shouts for the boy while trying to break free from the guard's hands. The young man then realizes what he needs to do to turn the tide in this battle. With a sweaty face, he thinks he needs to get the book to the old man somehow. He then starts running toward Klaus, leaving a trail of fire behind him. Malik creates a giant wave of water and says he won't let the boy pass. With a furious look, the villain prepares to end this once and for all. The water advances, and the boy prepares to hand over the Grimoire before he is hit. The young man throws himself into the air and hurls the book with all his might toward Klaus. The object flies through the air amidst the fire and water clashing on the battlefield. Both are hit head-on by the wave of water that floods the entire place. The boy shouts for the old man, as he is thrown far away along with the magic stones. Despite being hit, Klaus manages to catch the jewels that were falling in the confusion. A large explosion of light and steam occurs, and Malik just watches the scene. The impact of the explosion throws the young man hard against the dungeon wall. He falls to the ground completely exhausted and hurt. After all that effort, lying there, he whispers Malik's name with a look full of anger and determination. Klaus, now with the Grimoire in hand, begins to place the stones in their proper places. With a serious look, he says that Malik's party ends right now. The villain watches him with a slight smile on his face, looking very calm. He asks if the mage really thought someone like him would lose to an old man. A guard then brings in 3 strange children with scars on their heads and enslaved people's clothes. Malik says he brought the new recruits, who seem to be in some kind of trance. Klaus is shocked and asks if those are the other children who were kidnapped. The boy notices something black on one of their shoulders and wonders if it's mana. The villain points to the mark and asks if that's what they were talking about. He presses the black jewel and says he created it especially to defeat Klaus. With a quick motion, the man mercilessly rips the stone from the child's body. The child falls to the ground and one of the guards kicks their body to the side. The little enslaved child's body lies on the ground, not moving after the attack. The young man and Klaus are horrified by the cruel scene they just witnessed. One of the guards is terrified by his boss's action and calls him a scoundrel. Klaus is horrified and asks if the villain has stooped to performing experiments on people. On the ground, the bodies of the children who were used as test subjects lie still. The boy doesn't understand what the word experimentation means and is very confused. The villain says that as a mage, he just wanted power and those brats were going to perish like trash anyway. Hatred fills the young man upon hearing the nobleman's cruel and heartless words. Malik approaches one of the victims and says this was for his research. With a smile, he says that being useful for such a sublime study is a great honor. Klaus shouts the traitor's name with great anger, while the other smiles maliciously. A dark red aura begins to emanate from Malik's body, completely enveloping him. To protect himself, Klaus creates a fire barrier that shields the other enslaved people. With the grimoire in hand, he launches a blast of fire against Malik's attack. The boy watches everything impressed and says that is a mage's true magic. But the villain's dark magic is too strong and begins to swallow Klaus's flames. The mage feels the pressure of the attack and struggles to keep the barrier up. Malik mocks him and says he dreamed of the day he would bring him to his knees. He threatens to use every last drop of his and the boy's blood as new test subjects. Seeing the situation, the boy realizes that at this rate, they won't be able to win. Desperately, he tries to balance himself in the middle of the chaos in the dungeon. The young man then looks at one of the magic stones he managed to save from the fire. He wonders if he can do that again if he uses the stone like before. Klaus's voice echoes in his mind, telling him to remember that unique feeling. The young man understands that a glowing pattern will appear if he concentrates hard. He refuses to be a test subject for the rest of his life and clutches the stone tightly. With a cry of determination, the boy says he will see all the stones. He wants to know all the magic stones that exist outside of that place. With his eyes glowing purple, he focuses all his energy on the jewel in his hand. With a roar of fury, a purple and red energy suddenly explodes from his body. The dark magic envelopes the boy as Malik and Klaus watch in shock. The power released is so great that the two mages are left speechless at the scene. The villain and Klaus are engulfed by the dark energy that spreads through the place. With a look of pure hatred, he commands that place and the villain to burn to the ground. The boy extends his hand with the stone and unleashes all his magic at once. An explosion of power occurs in the dungeon, throwing all the guards far away. Malik can't believe he used ancient magic without even having a grimoire. The villain spits out some blood and becomes furious because all of that was supposed to be his. The boy tells everything to burn to ashes as he releases even more power. His eyes glow intensely and the stone in his hand emits a red light. The jewel shines with immense power, filled with a dark and mysterious energy. The aura of fire and darkness continues to expand further and further throughout the dungeon. The stone in the boy's hand transforms into a red, perfectly polished jewel. Klaus realizes the boy is causing the mana stones to go into berserk mode. The villain screams in pain as he tries to control the dark power that is consuming him. He places one of the black jewels in his grimoire to try to amplify his magic. The dark energy transforms into a black liquid that moves toward the young man. Malik yells that he is nothing but an insignificant enslaved boy and launches his attack. The villain's attack clashes with the boy's fire barrier, creating a power struggle. The two magics collide in the center of the dungeon, causing a huge explosion. The nobleman gets angry and says he won't lose to a boy who has just awakened. The dark magic and fire dance across the battlefield in a spectacle of light. The boy concentrates on keeping the barrier firm against the enemy's attack. With a confident smile, the boy faces the villain without any fear in his eyes. Malik's guards stand frozen, not knowing what to do in the midst of all the chaos. The villain yells at them, telling them to do something about that enslaved boy. Claw's granddaughter is also present, and the guards surround her to protect her. The boy realizes he needs to think of a strategy to get out of this situation. One of the guards says it will be a problem if they surround them and suggests a retreat. Another henchman says they need to get the other enslaved people out of there quickly. In that case, the guard decides they need to deal with the boy first. The young man shouts for the old man and asks him to take care of the enslaved people behind them. Claus gets the message and prepares to protect the other prisoners. He turns and watches the enslaved people cowering in fear in the corner of the dungeon. The battle between the boy and the villain continues with both using all their power. The guards advance to attack the boy, but he repels them with his fire magic. The boy's chain breaks in the middle of the battle, completely freeing him. One of the guards is hit squarely by the flames and screams in pain from the attack. Malik becomes furious and says he won't let a brat like him humiliate him. With the broken chain, the young man can now move freely around the battlefield. The two glare at each other with hatred as the magical battle rages on. Claus helps the other children to their feet and tells them to run now. He clears a path through the flames so the other enslaved people can escape. Claus' granddaughter watches the scene as the villain launches another powerful attack. The man uses his sword to try to cut through the boy's magic, but fails. The young man retaliates with a fire attack, and the villain tries to protect himself with his magic. With a face full of determination, the boy continues to fight with everything he has. Claus' granddaughter creates a magic circle to protect herself and the guards. Malik becomes enraged and says it's impossible for him to lose to a mere enslaved boy. She places her hand on the circle and casts a very powerful protection spell. The magic shield shatters from the force of the boy's attack, surprising everyone. The villain is hit by the black jewels he himself created to defeat Claus. With a final scream of pain, the man is consumed by an explosion of fire and darkness. The dark flames and fire dance around the boy who watches his fallen enemy. The villain gets up with difficulty and faces the young man who ruined all his plans. He touches the dark energy that is hurting him and prepares for one last attack with a cry of hatred. He tells the boy to perish and launches a sphere of darkness. A sphere of black magic forms around the young man, trapping him inside. Claus' granddaughter watches the giant sphere that closes completely with no way out. The villain smiles, satisfied, thinking he has finally managed to defeat the boy. But suddenly, the sphere begins to crack from the inside out, surprising everyone. The man is thrown far away by the explosion of power that follows. The young man emerges from the shadows and tells the villain not to get in his way again. The man is completely consumed by the flames and screams in pain from the attack. Defeated, the villain falls to the ground unconscious as the boy stands watching him. Claus says he knew the boy had potential but didn't expect so much power. He is impressed because the newly awakened boy managed to defeat an experienced mage. The young man approaches and asks if Malik is a criminal for everything he's done. With a smile, he asks if they can make the villain pay for his crimes. Claus smiles and says they can certainly make that happen right now. He uses a magic stone in his Grimoire to cast a teleportation spell. Malik's body is enveloped in a green light and disappears from the dungeon. The old man says to take the man to the surface to be judged. The boy clutches the stone in his hand and the dark energy begins to dissipate, exhausted. The young man nearly falls, but Claus catches him and helps him recover. The old man tells the boy to control himself, because they are leaving that place. Together, they climb the dungeon stairs toward the light of freedom. As they emerge from the darkness, the sunlight greets them with a beautiful cloud-filled sky. The boy looks at the sky and the broken chain on his neck and says they are free. With a happy smile, he celebrates that they finally managed to get out of there. The young man calls for the old man and asks him to show him where to find the magic stones. But one of the guards points at him and shouts that it was that enslaved boy who set fire to the mansion. In an instant, the boy is surrounded by a group of knights with swords drawn. Next, he is taken to a courtroom to be tried for the crime he didn't commit. A judge bangs the gavel and begins the trial against the young and innocent enslaved boy. He says the defendant is an enslaved person accused of setting fire to Lord Malik's property. With a contentious smile, the judge says there is no need for questioning. Without even hesitating, he sentences him to be taken away and the crowd shouts to get rid of him. The nobles in the audience call him a filthy slave and demand his immediate removal. 2 guards approach to take him away, but the boy maintains a defiant look. With clenched teeth, he glares at the judge who unjustly condemned him. Suddenly, a mysterious voice emerges in the courtroom and says they wish to present an objection. A man in noble clothes and glasses appears to defend the boy from the false accusation. The boy turns and recognizes the old man who helped him in the dungeon moments ago. The audience is shocked to recognize the Maestro of Miracles, Lord Klaus. He says that judging someone just for being an enslaved person seems a bit hasty with a serious look. The mage then addresses His Majesty, the king, directly. On his throne, the king watches the scene in silence, looking very bored with everything. The king says it has been a long time and greets him. Calling him by the name of Klaus, he asks why such an important man would try to protect a simple enslaved boy. The young man listens to the conversation in silence next to his unexpected defender. Klaus surprises everyone by saying that this boy is his newest apprentice. The king is completely shocked and repeats the word apprentice, not understanding at all. He gets worked up and shouts if that means an enslaved person has awakened their powers. Klaus then hands the boy the grimoire and a glowing magic stone. The young man holds the magical objects and looks at the mage with a very confused expression. His eyes widen in surprise at the actions of the old man who saved him. With a gentle smile, the old mage encourages him to show his true power. The boy gives a slight smile, because now he understands exactly what he needs to do. He holds the magic stone tightly and prepares for what's to come. He thinks that for these people to listen to him, he needs to show his true worth. The boy needs to prove that he is not just an enslaved person, but someone with power. With a determined look, he vows to show everyone who the real villain is. The guards approach to remove his chains and take him away from there. But the king says if he really is a grimoire's myth, they must listen to him. He becomes thoughtful and seems to consider the possibility of an enslaved person awakening. However, the king says he has never heard of an enslaved person becoming a grimoire's myth. A nobleman in the audience agrees and says they are a very rare existence. Another man says that only a few awaken per year and that it's impossible for an enslaved person. The boy places the magic stone in the grimoire to prove they are all wrong. A huge wave of water suddenly appears, completely enveloping him in the courtroom. The audience is speechless at the young enslaved boy's demonstration of power. Even the king is surprised by the scene and watches everything very attentively. With a smile, he says that is a very simple water spell to use. The nobleman from before shouts that there must be some mistake, because this can't be real. He says countless nobles wish to become grimoire's myths and fail. The boy rolls his eyes and mutters that all they know is how to talk blah blah blah. Tired of the conversation, he launches a blast of water toward that man. The water surrounds the nobleman, who is paralyzed with fear, unable to move. He breaks into a cold sweat as the water dances around him menacingly. The young man says all they know is how to talk about bloodlines and look down on others. He asks if nobles and grimoire's myths are so amazing that they can get away with anything with a furious and hateful look. He demands that they answer him now. The water gets very close to the nobleman's face, who starts sweating from fear, stuttering. The man replies that of course not, as that would be absurd. He says that taking a life is never permitted by law, no matter the situation. With a confident smile, the boy listens to the nobleman's words very carefully. He then says that in that case, there is someone there who deserves to be punished much more. The man in the top hat stares at him from a distance, not understanding what he's implying. The young man says that the man who tried to take his and the old man's lives is the real culprit. He accuses Malik of using children for his cruel experiments. The king looks to the side and calls Klaus to confirm the boy's story. The mage then confirms that everything his new apprentice said is the absolute truth. He says that without the boy, he wouldn't be there and suggests they look for proof in the basement. The boy remembers the children Malik had brought to the dungeon before. He knows they can serve as proof of the villain's experiments on people. The young man says if the country is going to get rid of him just for being an enslaved person, then fine. But he warns that he will fight with everything he has to get out of that place. The water he controls spreads through the courtroom, soaking some of the nobles. Klaus then interjects and says that is what he claims will happen. He asks the king if it's all right to let a precious grimoire as myth go. The king stares at him with a serious and thoughtful look after hearing his question. The two stand in the middle of the courtroom awaiting His Majesty's decision. With a sigh, the king says of course not and declares the trial is over. He orders the knights to investigate Malik's property immediately. Klaus and the boy then turn to leave the courtroom after the king's decision. But before they leave, the king calls Klaus's name to give one last warning. He tells the mage not to lose sight of his new and promising apprentice. Klaus bows and says he will do as His Majesty wishes. Outside, the boy stretches and celebrates that he is finally free. With a smile on his face, he feels refreshed after being trapped for so long. Klaus watches him and comments that he looks completely different in those clothes. The boy asks if he is a powerful mage, as they called him the strongest. The old man corrects him and says to call him master and that he is a grimoire's myth. Excited, he asks where the stones are and what he needs for the journey. Klaus tells him to calm down, but the boy keeps talking about preparations. The master says that as his apprentice, he will study the fundamentals of a grimoire's myth. The young man is shocked and says he just wants to look for the stones, and Klaus calls him Alan. With a pouty face, Alan listens to his new master very attentively. Klaus explains that the continent is very dangerous because of the demons from the west. With a serious look, he tries to make the boy understand the gravity of the situation. He says it would be reckless to travel alone and that he would perish before he left. Even so, the boy clenches his fist, determined to follow his dream no matter what. Alan insists he wants to go look for the stones and reminds the master of his promise. With a determined look, he says it was Klaus himself who told him about that world. The mage sighs and seems to understand the anxiety of his new and talented apprentice. He touches the boy's head with the grimoire and says he knows all too well. Klaus explains that's why he needs to become a true grimoire's myth. He says that to look for the magic stones, Alan needs to acquire knowledge. The master shows some jewels and talks about their properties and classifications. He explains that the boy's perspective will change if he understands magic. If he studies at the magic tower, he will gain power and everything he needs for his quest. The mage advises Alan to use the magic tower's support to his own advantage. He says that way, the boy can live exactly as he wants in that world. Alan repeats his master's words with a slight smile and a thoughtful look. He looks at his hands and at the magic stones he so desperately wants to find. The young man understands that to live as he wants, he needs to become stronger first. With a determined look, he agrees with his master and accepts the proposal. He says if that's what the master says, then he'll go to the magic tower. But with a mischievous smile, he warns that if he thinks it's a waste of time, he will leave on his journey immediately without a second thought. Klaus smiles and says he thinks that's fair, as he trusts his apprentice's potential. He then welcomes the boy to the magic tower, where it will all begin. The tower reveals itself as a grand place, and the newest grimoire's myth has arrived. Alan's first day at the magic tower finally begins, and he's ready for anything. His master then starts to explain a little about how things work around there. Klaus reveals that the tower is the main defense against fiends and a research center. The Grimoire smiths can take on missions for the state or focus on their research. Everyone there is free to follow the path they think is best for themselves. The protagonist listens intently as his master continues the explanation. The mage points to a staircase and tells the young man to go complete his final registration. Alan is a bit confused when his master suddenly starts to walk away. Klaus says he has other matters to attend to and won't be able to go with him. With a serious look, the mage wishes his apprentice good luck on his new journey. The boy then begins to climb the gigantic, endless staircase of the magic tower. Exhausted, he complains that the stairs are way too long and he can't go on climbing. With a grumpy face, he doesn't seem very happy about the long walk. Finally, the boy reaches the top and wonders if this is the right place. With a mischievous smile on his face, he approaches the counter to register. Suddenly, something flies past the boy's face very quickly and he gets startled. He turns to the side and sees enormous gears moving on the wall of the room. The young man is shocked and wonders what this place is with people floating around. One of the mages is writing on a wall that glows with golden letters. He realizes the wall is actually a giant book and is impressed. Meanwhile, other people are using their own grimoires to study and research.
Alan doesn't quite understand what everyone is doing in this strange place.
A blonde girl bumps into him and asks if he is the Mr. Allen they were expecting. The boy is startled by the cheerful receptionist's sudden approach. The woman smiles and says the master of the magic tower told her about his arrival. She congratulates him and says that with his signature, his registration is finally complete. Next, the receptionist hands him his identification on a special tray. The protagonist looks at the object and wonders if it's a man of stone. The woman confirms it and explains that since he is an apprentice, it's a water stone. She says he can rank up by doing missions and gain more authority eagerly. He asks if he can take a mission now, and she says yes right away. The receptionist points to the giant book he saw earlier and calls it Memoria. She explains that Memoria holds all the records of missions and research in the tower. The young woman also says it stores personal data and invites him to touch the book. The boy then extends his hand toward the enormous magic book to interact with it. Upon touching the surface, a message appears and authenticates his access as Alan. The message also shows his apprentice rank and asks what he would like to do. The woman advises that he can also use voice commands and suggests asking for missions. The young man says he wants to accept a mission, and the book shows all the options. With a smile on her face, the receptionist says he doesn't have to say it in pieces. The receptionist explains that as a general rule, apprentices need to team up with someone of a higher rank for missions. Meanwhile, the magic book continues to show all the available missions for him to choose from. The woman then reveals that for his first mission, the master has already chosen one for him. But the boy points to another and says he'd rather do the ore investigation one. She gets nervous and says that mission is for apprentices who are about to graduate as it involves facing fiends. Even so, the book confirms the mission has been accepted, leaving the receptionist in a panic. She yells that he really accepted it and that it's very dangerous, but the young man seems quite calm. While the woman panics, the boy asks who this Lucas person on the mission is. Surprised, she asks if he hasn't met his mission partner yet. She reveals that Lucas is the only apprentice of the Master of Miracles, Klaus himself. The young woman says he became an intermediate mage in 4 years when the normal is 10. Another receptionist appears and calls him an absolute genius, and Alan makes a sour face. They say the master hadn't taken any apprentices for decades, but accepted this Lucas fellow. And that rumors say he is the only one capable of inheriting Klaus research. From a distance, another mage overhears the receptionist's entire conversation. He approaches and comments that he heard the new apprentice used to be a slave. The woman ignores the comment and fawn over Alan, thinking he's a cutie. The boy just ignores it and thinks about what it will be like to have a senior apprentice with him. With the mission papers in hand, the young man turns and leaves the place. He then arrives in front of a very luxurious door, seemingly looking for someone. The boy thinks it's a pain to have to form a 2-person team and opens the door. But he decides he just needs to put up with it until his rank finally goes up in the tower. Upon entering, a blonde man yells angrily, saying it's only been 3 days. The masked boy complains about the mess and wonders why the place is like this. He continues to grumble about how no one puts things back where they belong. Crouching down, he picks up some important documents that were left on the floor. The blonde then realizes he's not alone and calls out for the master with a serious look. The young apprentice asks who he is, and Alan just stares at him in silence. With a surprised look, the masked boy finally understands who is there. He introduces himself as Lucas Valen and says he is Alan's senior apprentice. The boy thinks so that's the famous Lucas and admits he was a bit startled. The older one asks if he has been informed about the mission they will do together. He tells the rookie to relax because since it's his first mission, he'll be there to help. The blonde hands a paper to the boy and offers to answer any questions. But the young man says he's not nervous and that he'll be fine on the mission. Then Alan reveals he decided to take a different mission and shows the paper. The senior is confused and asks if it's the mission at the mine in the southern forest. He sees the official seal and says it's no place for a first mission at all. Ignoring the warning, the boy simply asks when they will be leaving. Lucas replies that if they take the morning carriage, they can get there in 2 hours. Alan simply says they will leave tomorrow morning and starts to leave the room. The rookie doesn't even look back and continues on his way with a very determined air. Alone in the room, the blonde just looks at the papers scattered on his desk. He then complains out loud because he had just tidied up that whole mess. Meanwhile, the boy walks down a circular hallway with a book in his hand. He thinks his new mission partner seems like a nice guy. But upon seeing the senior picking up papers from the floor, he notices something more. The young man watches him from afar as Lucas begins to study the materials. He decides that since they are traveling together, there's no need to become friends. The boy decides to grab some books that look useful while he has the chance. With the books in his hands, his only desire at that moment is to read them all. With a determined smile, he dives into his reading, completely focused on learning. In one of the documents, he finds information about a grimoire ceremony. The boy wants to embark on his journey as soon as possible to see the stones. So he spends the entire night studying and reading various books in the library. Suddenly, he wakes up and wonders if he fell asleep without realizing it. The young man then gets up and looks down at the lower floor of the enormous room. He sees his partner still working at his desk, even though it's very late. The senior seems to be analyzing some magic stones with great attention. The boy's eyes sparkle as he sees the beautiful gems his partner is holding. One of the stones emits an intense purple light and has a very special glow. The blonde continues his work with the magic stones without noticing he's being watched. But he senses the rookie's presence and apologizes, asking if he woke him up. The boy comes down the stairs and approaches the table, saying it's no problem. He then picks up one of the gems and hands it to the senior, who watches him. With a smile on his face, the boy admires the stone and says it's very beautiful. The blonde is surprised and asks if the rookie can also see the magic in it. He explains that in the tower, only the master, and he can see the gem's ancient magic. But the boy is more interested in the golden frame of that small stone. He compares it to the others and says that, just as he thought, that frame is different. The senior is completely confused by the boy's random comment. Then the young man points to two gems and states that they are exactly the same. The senior understands and explains that the border design is different for a reason. The boy gets curious and asks about attribute and derivative gems. The blonde explains that the gems are processed, so a mage can use them. With an attentive look, he confirms that he understood his partner's explanation. The gems are divided into two types according to the ancient magic inside them. Attribute gems manipulate natural forces like fire, water, earth, and wind. Derivative gems, on the other hand, because phenomena that are not attributes, like other powers. They can do all sorts of things, like seeing through objects and more. The senior continues explaining that derivative gems can also enhance hearing. The boy points to an empty slot in the grimoire his partner is holding. He then places the gems and shows that the circuits on the left and right are different. The right is for derivative gems, while the other is for attribute gems. The rookie asks if the circuit is what extracts the ancient magic, and the blonde confirms it. The senior explains that because they have grimoires, they can use this type of magic. Alan holds the attribute gem and observes it with a look full of curiosity. His partner then says that grimoires are the most important thing of all. The young man listens to the explanation attentively, seeming very focused on the topic. With a serious look, the senior states that for a mage, it is life itself. The boy remembers that his master had also said something similar to that. A memory of Klaus yelling not to touch his book comes to his mind. The blonde says that a grimoire perfect for the mage makes using magic easier. The rookie asks if the ease of use really changes that much with the book. The senior then understands why the boy took on such a reckless mission. He realizes that the reward for that mission is the right to participate in the selection. The boy confirms it is, and the older one tells him to return the gems he took. With a smile, the young man thinks that his own grimoire will be a travel companion. The carriage wheels spin quickly as they head out on their mission. The next morning, the two finally arrive at the mysterious southern forest. The blonde comments that the ground is very muddy because of the rain that fell. The boy asks if that's the miner's village, and his partner confirms it. They walk toward the village, but notice there's no one around. The two stand there, observing the completely empty and silent village. The rookie asks if the mine is very close to justify the silence. His partner replies yes, and that the entrance is right past the village. Suddenly, the boy senses something strange and becomes alert to the situation. At that moment, a shadow dashes at high speed right between the two mages. Then, several demonic beasts with red eyes appear to attack them. The senior says that those are the creatures they need to defeat in the mission. With a serious look, the boy confirms he has the grimoire he received. From above, we see that the pair of mages is completely surrounded by the wolves. The boy remembers the gems that were lent to him for this specific mission. He received one of fire, another of water, and also one of earth for the battle. The blonde thinks that using fire would be the fastest, but could spread the flames. So he tells the rookie to stay close so he can protect him properly.
The senior prepares to cast a spell using his earth attribute gem.
But the boy smiles and says he can protect himself as he activates his magic with a look full of confidence. The young man prepares to show his power. He then touches the earth gem in his grimoire to cast his first spell. A golden light emanates from the grimoire as the young man prepares for combat. A shining magic circle forms on the ground right beneath his feet. His partner is surprised to see the rookie using magic so easily. The boy feels the power of the gem, and even though he finds it hard to control, he continues. With a determined shout, he raises a huge wave of sand from the ground. The sand turns into sharp spikes that strike one of the demonic beasts. The monster begins to dissolve into dark particles after being hit by the attack. The senior is covered in dust and watches the scene, impressed by what he sees. The blonde is shocked, and the boy explains he learned how to take down fiends yesterday. With a smile on his face, the senior seems to finally recognize the rookie's worth. He admits the boy is worthy of being the master's apprentice and apologizes. Then the senior challenges him to show more of his power as they fight together. The duo fights in perfect sync, combining earth and wind attacks. Suddenly, one of the wolves leaps over a roof to attack the blonde by surprise, but the two mages are alert and ready for any unexpected attack. A distant scream catches the duo's attention, and they look toward the mine. They see one of the miners being attacked by one of the demonic beasts. Without a second thought, the two use magic to propel themselves toward the danger. The rookie complains that the place is still too far, and they might not make it in time. Just then, his partner grabs him by the shirt collar, leaving the boy confused. The senior holds him tight and tells him not to let go of the grimoire, no matter what. With a serious look, the blonde begins to conjure a wind spell called Estrafala. A whirlwind of wind surrounds them and launches them into the air at incredible speed. The older one shouts his partner's name as they fly toward the mine. The boy opens his eyes and prepares for what's to come upon landing. Inside the mine, one of the men is surrounded by the beasts and seems to have no escape. The duo flies over a giant wolf that appears to be the leader of the pack. Still in the air, the young man uses his grimoire and casts another earth spell on the ground. Pillars of earth rise from the ground, protecting the miner from the creature's attacks. The man is relieved and thanks them for saving him just in the nick of time. The blonde tells him to get to a safe place while the two of them handle the rest. Then, a huge wolf appears and the senior understands why there were so many creatures. The giant beast was the father of the other wolves and he doesn't look happy at all. The boy's eyes sparkle and he notices something in the stone on the wolf's forehead. He can see a very faint golden light inside the creature's central stone. The boy asks his partner if it's possible to defeat fiends without destroying the stone. His special vision reveals that inside the fiend's stone, there is a man of stone. But his companion can't see anything and is confused by the rookie's question. The young man wonders if he's the only one who sees it or if there's some special connection. With a smile, he tells his partner that if he wants to know, he'll have to see for himself. He licks his lips and says there's no other choice but to get that stone. The young man explains that to remove the gem, they first need to stop the beast's movements. At that, his partner asks if he can really see a golden light in the stone. The boy confirms that he can, and although it's faint, he can see it. With that, the blonde realizes the rookie isn't lying and can see something unique. The senior then agrees to the plan, and the boy gets super excited about the decision. He says he'll help, and Alan explains he'll trap the creature for the other to attack. The senior thinks the plan is clever and begins to conjure a wind spell. He then casts an imprisonment spell to hold the giant wolf in place. The creature is caught by the magic, and the senior yells for his partner to go. The boy then touches the earth gem and starts to imagine the next steps. He focuses on breaking the ground around the fiend and turning it into sand. Meanwhile, his partner floats in the air, keeping the beast trapped with his magic. The rookie remains focused on his spell to make the sand finer and finer. With that, the ground around the creature turns into tiny grains of sand. The monster struggles but can't escape the trap that is slowly forming. Next, the boy readies the water gem for the next step of his plan. A huge amount of water is poured onto the sand, turning everything into a muddy bog. With a determined look, the young man prepares to finish the imprisonment spell. The wolf's head is thrown back by the force of the water that hardens the mud. Seeing the creature trapped, the boy shouts for his partner to attack at that moment. In the sky, the senior prepares a blade of wind to cut the fiend's stone. He points his hand and fires the attack with all his might toward the monster. The blade hits the beast square in the face, but seems to have had no effect. The blonde is in shock to see that his strongest attack simply didn't work. The boy is also surprised, as the senior's magic was easily reflected. The older one explains that the base of the stone is too hard and wind alone won't cut it. The boy wonders what they will do now that the initial plan has failed. He then looks at his fire and wind gems and gets a brilliant new idea. Realizing that wind alone is not enough, he decides he needs to use the fire gem. The young man shouts for his partner to use the same wind attack one more time. The blonde agrees immediately and prepares another wind blade for a new attack. Just then, the boy uses the fire gem because for hard things you need to use heat. An intense red energy begins to emanate from the small gem in his hand. He wonders if he can add the heat of the fire to his partner's wind magic. The rookie then extends his hand toward the magic that is being formed. The senior is stunned to see flames mixing with his wind spell. Focused, the young man successfully mixes the power of fire with that of wind. The combined attack, now in flames, advances toward the demonic beast. With a serious look, the senior watches the final attack approaching the target. The young man shouts fire to finally launch the combined attack with his partner. The blonde confirms with a shout and fires the spell with all his strength at the creature. The flaming wind blade flies at high speed toward the giant beast. The attack hits the stone dead on and manages to rip it from the monster's forehead. With that, the fiend's body begins to dissolve as the gem flies away. The boy then lands safely on a nearby wooden platform. His partner celebrates the victory, saying they finally managed to get the gem. But he turns and sees the rookie jumping from the platform to catch the falling stone. The young man dives through the air with his arms outstretched, trying to reach the red gem. With his hands ready, he prepares to grab the shining stone at the last second.